Hello, everyone. I'm Asha and Swami. This is Brahmachari Tandava, and here we are on our noontime conversations with Millennials. So, Tandava, today I would like to have you just talk about what it means to you to be a disciple. What it is to be a disciple, how it informed your life, how it changed your life. So, why don't we just start, with the word disciple? What is a disciple in your life? How do you define yourself in that context?
Hmm. It's interesting that I had an answer all coming up ready to go, and then you said, "How do you define yourself?"
Mhm.
And I was going from the angle of what is discipleship,
Mhm.
because the way I think about it or feel about it a lot is as a relationship, and particularly uh, a friend relationship. Um, there's the concept of an Ishtadeva. Is that the word, your chosen form of how you worship God?
Mhm.
And whether it's Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, a deity, I always liked the concept of divine friend.
Mhm.
And and for me, that is to some extent all of our gurus, but particularly Yogananda. And and particularly Yogananda in his sort of playful, sometimes mischievous, joyful kind of aspect. Um, and I like to think of him as a friend that's always hanging out with me, and we're exploring the world, and we're just going, wow, isn't this an awesome, crazy life? Let's figure out how we go through this together. And just being there for each other, with each other all the time. And it's somebody you can just talk to about, like, what are we going to do here in this weird situation? Or wasn't that really funny how this worked out? Or anything like that. But just somebody who's always there, always with you, always loving, always accepting, always helping, the perfect divine friend. And that relationship to me is one of the ways I really like to think about discipleship.
How did you ever stumble onto such a thing? I mean, how did it grow up in your life? It's not normal in American society, and you're American, to just sort of except as a child to have what people would call an imaginary friend. Did you have
Yeah,
imaginary friends when you were a child?
I don't think so. I mean, I
Mhm.
like had toys and stuffed animals and things, but I don't think I ever really had the typical
Mhm.
imaginary friend. I don't know how I just how I got onto that. Maybe it was just specific experiences. Maybe it was thinking about the fact that we pray to friend, beloved God at the beginning of all our prayers, and friend is right there in there. Um, Maybe it's my sense of Yogananda's personality from reading the autobiography and his other writings. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. And there was a time when I was journaling a lot, uh, and I got into the habit of, instead of just writing to myself in my journal or writing dear diary or anything, I figured, why not address these all to master? So I would just write, dear master, dear Guruji, everything I wrote in there, I'm writing it anyway. Why not just make it a letter, make it a conversation? And I think that really helped develop it as well.
Did you do that for years, for weeks? I mean, did it
Some
over the
some
course?
years at least. I journaled a lot more in the past. It's not as active a part of my life right now, but
Mhm.
for a number of years when I was newer at Ananda, I was still doing that quite a bit, and that was at least a few years. Yeah.
So how did so your journal became your letters to a friend. How did how when did you begin to trust Yogananda like that? Was it from reading autobiography of a yogi? Was it immediate? Did it come on you
Hmm.
slowly?
It was certainly not immediate. I don't know that I can pick a moment. Over the course of the first year or so that I was at Ananda, um, I I was sort of conflicted. I think we had this conversation earlier on about the head and the heart, and one gets on board first, and the other has to catch up. And and I think once I really landed here and just started coming to services, coming to classes just all the time, my heart was totally on board. And I was really clear, this is great, this is what I need. And it's coming from Yogananda. Like I had met Swami, but it was just so clear that he was bringing us Yogananda's consciousness. But I did, my head was caught up in like, well, discipleship, commitment, what does this mean? Can I do it? What if I change my mind? Those kind of things. I had sort of before Ananda, the way I thought I was going to be happy in life was through a romantic relationship. Mm-hmm. And there was work, there was hobbies, all this nice stuff, but that's what I thought was going to be the thing that did it. And, I'd had a really big one that completely went up in flames. Mm-hmm. And I think I was still shaken by that. Like, oh, how do I want to commit to anything? This isn't a relationship in the same way, but it's the relationship of its sorts. Am I going to get burned the same way? Is this right? How do I really know? Because I don't know how things are going to play out. All of those things. And I remember I had a conversation with David Praver about it because he was teaching the discipleship class, and just about how it's an ongoing thing, an ongoing process. It's not, there is this moment maybe when you decide to take the discipleship vows, but nothing stops, nothing is fixed. It's always just growing and developing. I can't remember the exact words that he used, but somehow, and maybe it was just him being him because he can do this. It felt okay, and it let me relax into the fact that everything is just seems to be exactly what I need right now. Everything is working. I love it here. I love the teachings. I feel better than I felt in a long time. Why wouldn't I just keep going with this? And so there's a little bit of taking it on faith that it's going to keep on working, but part of that is being willing to go ahead and take a step and say, like, yes, this is working well enough right now that I trust it will keep doing so, and give it a chance to prove itself, the spiritual path to prove itself.
I think that's when you have enough belief to conduct the experiment, and then the experience you have from the experiment gives you real faith in and so you had enough belief from the experience. Exactly. So then did you consciously then try to cultivate a friendship with Yogananda, or did it just come on? Did you say, here would be a good practice?
I don't think so. Uh-huh. And this started about 10 or 11 years ago, so maybe I've forgotten some details. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I know I prayed to Yogananda, and I prayed for help and guidance just with being okay with the whole thing about being a disciple and making some sort of a commitment. I don't think it ever came down in a lightning bolt, right. But over time, that prayer was absolutely answered, because here I still am, and there's no way I can imagine being anything other than a disciple. So however he worked it out, he worked it out. And I know even before I became a disciple, I was aware that, Yogananda was there and available me, and pray about it, him specifically as relate to. I need.
That was weird, huh?
That was weird.
Okay, but you're back. We've been
yep, and you're back, and we can edit this out later.
But now, just for the sake of those who are listening, we got you were sort of explaining, I think, a little bit. We got past the point where you were conducting the experiment, and I asked you whether it was a deliberate practice, and you said it began to grow on you. That's basically where we were when we lost the sound, when you went on holiday.
Oh, so we missed a lot there.
We missed that whole last thing that you
yeah. um, I don't think it ever really became a deliberate, specific practice, but from the beginning, I was, excuse me, I was aware that Yogananda was available sort of as a consciousness to relate to, and I would pray to Yogananda, and just ask for help being okay with this whole concept of discipleship. And like, I don't know if I'm your disciple, but if I am, maybe you could help me figure this out and be clear on it. And nothing ever came through in a bolt of lightning, but over time it worked out. And and maybe it was Swami's example, maybe it was the example of the other teachers and people I met around Ananda. But the idea that you can relate to Master even though he doesn't have a body.
Tell me what part Swami Ananda played in the evolution of your spiritual life.
The first time I saw him was right after the relationship I mentioned went up in flames. I sort of think of some people get to the spiritual path through Jupiter, and their Jupiter return is this wonderful spiritual unfoldment time. And some people come through Saturn when Saturn comes and steamrollers your life and you need something. And that's where I was in the latter one. I was about 28 or so and was feeling steamrollered. And there was Swami, and I think part of what was going on was I was cracked open enough to let something in. But Swami felt very much like a catalyst. And we talked about this some in our first interview, and how I was just kind of overwhelmed with feeling the first time I saw him. I didn't know exactly what to do with it or how to process it, but I could tell something happened. And it took a year and a half, actually, before I had gotten myself to whatever point I needed to do to actually show up, come to church, take the meditation classes here. But I always felt that Swami was what did it. In fact, for years, I would tell the story that I saw Swami and then I came to Ananda. And some years later, I actually remembered, oh, wait, it was actually 18 months between those two things. Because in my mind, it was just a direct connection.
Right. I have a similar memory. I met Swami and that was that, but it was like more than a year. It's sort of like the reality was the meeting and the decision. And then there was a lot of Maya in between that filled up a little time.
Yeah.
But the part of you just remembers that two real things happened. One was meeting Swami and one was making commitment. So you knew you came early enough that you saw Swami in the body a number of times. Did you feel that your connection to Yogananda was through him? Did he interfere? Did he enhance it? How did he?
I saw him a handful of times. Not, I don't think ever one-on-one, sometimes in small groups, but it was usually brief. So I didn't spend a ton of time on him. I feel like I've always been very conscious about how crucial Swami has been in just bringing all of this to us and making it accessible and making it understandable and applicable to every aspect of our lives. I'm not sure what it would have been like if I'd spent more time with him. I remember one moment, it may have been the last time I ever saw him. It was probably 2012 when I was working at East West and he stopped in at the store before flying back to Italy or wherever he was going. And I remember being up close to him at one point and going, oh my goodness, this is an old man. He's like wrinkled, can't walk around, he's got the big ears, like, what is this, just an old man? I had such this picture of Swami as just a consciousness, and I knew him from his talks, and I knew him from his books, and I just had this huge feeling of him. And then there's just this little old man. And it really felt weird for a little bit. And it was a joy to see him, of course, and everything. I just had that that what's the word for that clash of perceptions, that it was just odd.
Swami himself said that we were lucky never to have met Master in the body.
Yeah.
Because the contradiction between the sense of his consciousness and the presence of his body was actually, Swami himself said, it was hard to reconcile.
Yeah, and I can imagine just from my one little experience with Swami, it would be tempting to relate to him as a person and not as a consciousness. And that's maybe why I've never really worried too much about the fact that Yogananda isn't in the body and hasn't been at all in my lifetime. And I'm not sure maybe precisely where this came from, but I just feel very clear in myself that Master is not at all limited in what he can give me by not having a body. The only limitation is on my end. So if he were in a body, this same limitation would be here. I can only draw so much. Whatever I'm able to do at this moment is what I'm able to do and receive. And he's ready to give me more all the time, even now. And him having a body would not affect that.
That's very astute. How has your life been different since you became a disciple? I mean, many things change simultaneously, but how does being a disciple make your reality a different reality?
I think, one of my favorite words that I may have brought up before was context, and how there's a way for everything to fit in. And I think I may have spoken about this in terms of the spiritual path, but at this point, discipleship is the spiritual path. They're kind of the same thing. And that means whenever there's a difficulty or a decision or anything, there's a perspective you can zoom out to look at it from that is, more of an absolute perspective than anything else. And
therefore, so in your desire for a romantic relationship, which is something that you brought up earlier, you said happiness was always defined in terms, your happiness would come from a romantic relationship, but clearly you've found a different thought about that. So how did discipleship play into that? And is that really required on the spiritual path, or is that just your way of thinking?
Is being a monk required?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Let me see how I want to do this. We've all heard the teachings about how God is the greatest infinite bliss of all. But that doesn't mean it can automatically take hold in the heart. And if you still really want something, you still really want it. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. So, I was in another relationship by the time I actually came to Ananda, and I was in that for a couple of years. And when that ended, some months after that was when I decided to become a monk. And I did kind of struggle with the concept of, am I just doing this as a rebound kind of a thing, or is it really time? Because that's a question. It's hard to trust your judgment when there have been emotions going on and all of that. And it's hard to pinpoint what did it unless it's just the grace of God, which it probably was. But I apparently got to the point where I had, at that point, had enough relationships that I was ready to step back and do something different. Like, let's actually take another stab at this whole happiness thing and come at it from a different angle. Would
that be your going up and looking at things in context? Is that how you think?
But there's, just like Swami was a catalyst for me, there was a particular catalyst in this transition also. Because sometimes you just need someone or something to make a picture real for you and not have it just be theoretical. And for me, that was New Year's Day 2012, when Amit, who was still living here, took his brahmacharya vows and became a monk. And at that point in the community, I think we had a few we had a couple of women who were brahmacharinis of an older generation than me, and there's nobody in my demographic, as it were. And then here's Amit, who was early 30s, young man, and he goes up there and he becomes a monk. And I saw that and I went, oh, right, this applies to people like me too. This is a valid life choice that makes sense. And I just felt this inspiring devotion to God, to the spiritual path that brought him to do that. And it made me want to do the same thing, and it also made me want to be an example of the same thing, because I could feel how powerful it was to have the example shown to me. And so that was probably the catalyst when my heart clicked for it. And then the mind lagging behind all the time. This is a theme in my life. A month later, I had an astrological reading with Drupada. And on that day that I had seen Amit take his vows, I switched into a new astrological period, which was Ketu, which when he was trying very hard to not push me towards a decision when he described it, but when he described Ketu period to me, I just went, that sounds like a monk. and I sort of said, well, this is an astrological period of 7 years where it sounds like the stars at least will be supporting this. I'm feeling more of an inclination. It sounds worth giving it a shot. And it was, again, like recognizing I cannot necessarily commit to an entire lifetime. I have no idea what will happen. But I felt at that point there was enough to run with and see where it goes. Exactly. And that was almost 8 years ago now.
When you pass the 7-year mark, we're still in it.
So it's worked well enough so far.
The beauty of Ananda altogether is that it's supportive and it's fluid simultaneously. You've mentioned a couple of things, which was actually my next question. What part has the community played in your spiritual life and in your discipleship? How have your brothers and sisters inspired, guided, affected your life as a disciple?
After Swami Kriyananda, it was the other people here that really sealed the deal, as it were. You know, I'd never met so many people that I was just happy to be around, and just felt this love and joy emanating from everybody. Just even when I was new and just meeting people for the first time, I just kept having this reaction of like, wow, that's a really great person. Wow, that's and there was this commonality that I could see in all of them that I wanted. And since they were all here doing the same thing, that was the only common factor. It was really a strong draw here.
What was the commonality? What was it that was so attractive? I mean, you say someone's a really great person, but what are the characteristics that you saw that were attractive to you?
I think love and joy would probably be the best ways to describe them. You know, everybody's baseline of happiness is noticeably higher than the general population in the world. And I think I just felt accepted and loved, but in a general way, not like so particularly for me that I feel like I have to find out how to reciprocate with this because somebody's way too attached to me, but a more expansive feeling of love that you can just relax into and expand into and feel.
Did you tie that together with Yogananda or with Kriyananda? Did it make a loop, or how did you interpret all that? Did you?
I don't know how explicitly I did it, but this was the place where all these people were, where I felt that. And I had met a person here, a person there throughout my life that maybe made me feel the same way. But now I met a community that feels that way. And you know, it's hard to resist being part of it.
Yeah, that's exactly the way to put it. if somebody were talking to you and they said, I'm afraid to be a disciple because I'm afraid that I can't live up to it, I'm afraid I'll fail, how would you answer someone who said that to you?
Hmm. That's interesting. I'm trying to think of what it means to fail
Okay,
as a disciple. And I might want to unpack that first. Um,
we'll unpack
be-
that first.
well, I mean, from the person asking the question,
Uh-huh.
um, because I don't feel like discipleship has a, a succeed fail binary result.
Mhm.
Like I was saying earlier, it feels just like a relationship that's there. Um, and so if somebody is talking about, I'm not going to be a good disciple, and by good they mean I don't meditate enough, whatever standards or bar they're setting for themselves, and they fall from that, I would say that Master is here with us from here to infinity. And whatever we do along the way, he's still here with us. And, if we try something and we fail and fall back at that something, he's not going to let us down. He's going to be there with us when we decide to pick ourselves up and do it again, whether it's this lifetime or next lifetime or in 5 minutes from now.
Mhm.
He has all the time in the universe. We have all the time in the universe. He doesn't have to go anywhere. He is everywhere. The relationship
Uh-huh.
is there, and he's not trying to give you a pass fail grade on
Right,
this.
right. No, I think that's exactly the answer. But see, what you've also described is you've described friendship.
Which I said was my baseline of the relationship. Yeah.
I mean, it's very important to. I mean, maybe you want to speak about that. So, like, what is so attractive about the idea of friendship? Why does it please you so much to think of God in that way?
um, One of the reasons Master said friendship is the highest relationship because it's completely voluntary
Right.
and there's no coercion in it. And so there's that. For myself, friendship is natural and informal. It doesn't require you to be something you aren't.
Right.
Because your friend loves you when you're having a good day and he loves you when you're having a bad day. You
Right.
don't have to be putting on your performance
Right.
all the time. And for me, friendship is fun. And that's a word I remember using a lot in one of our previous conversations, but it is. And,
Mhm.
Master and I try and have fun together. And there have been moments when something came through so clearly as a message for Master, and it just made me laugh because of the way he had to deliver it.
Uh-huh.
I just
Uh-huh.
feel like, we'll play little jokes on each other or whatever, but it's all in good fun, and we're all just there helping and loving each other and enjoying each other's company.
I think that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you very much for being so open and willing to answer my questions. I, I, I really enjoyed hearing your story, and I hope others do as well.
My
God bless
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.